What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. Now, today we're going to be finishing up the record prediction series talking about our Week 17 matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings when they traveled to Detroit to take on the Detroit Lions in the season finale. But after that, I also want to talk about some team awards, MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Rookies of the Year, and more. So if you are excited for that and are new to the channel, please consider liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. That helps push my channel out, bring new people in. It takes 2 seconds out of your day. You press 2 different buttons and it makes my day. I would be very appreciative of everybody that chooses to do so. But with that being said, let's get into this Week 17 matchup versus the Minnesota Vikings and see if the Detroit Lions can finish the season strong and make it to the playoffs as a playoff team and hopefully a Super Bowl contender. Now, it's only fair to start with last year's game when the Minnesota Vikings came to Detroit early in the season, and unfortunately the Detroit Lions fell to those Vikings 42-30. However, the score is a little bit off-putting. The game was a lot closer than a 12-point contest. The Detroit Lions were competitive all game. They led several points in that game, and unfortunately on the last Minnesota drive, they were able to put points on the board, putting the Vikings up by 2 scores and kind of putting the game out of reach at the very end. However, it's not like the Detroit Lions were behind by 2 scores the entire time. The Detroit Lions were not outclassed the entire game. They were not, they really weren't, significantly worse than the Vikings in this previous matchup. And if you've watched the entirety of this series, yeah, obviously it's not necessary if you were watching this video. If this is your first video, welcome to my channel. But if you want to go back and watch the entirety of this series from week 1 to week 17, I suggest you go do that. However, it's not imperative to doing that right now. But in the first video I did talking about the Detroit Lions versus the Minnesota Vikings when we traveled to Minnesota, I said that I believe the Minnesota Vikings and the Detroit Lions will split their season series 1-1. And if you have watched that video, you know that I have the Detroit Lions losing that game in Minnesota. So it's only logical to believe that the Minnesota Vikings will lose in Detroit come week 17. And that is exactly what I have happening. However, I didn't want to just say the Lions are going to win and then move on. I wanted to give you, reasons how I think the game's going to play out and what I think the Lions need to do to win this, particular football game in week 17 versus these Minnesota Vikings. So I think the huge thing, and we talked about this in I believe it was the week 9 video talking about the Minnesota Vikings, they lost a lot of secondary players the past season. I believe they lost 6 or 7 guys in that secondary who were starters or role players. Those guys being Xavier Rhodes, who was a starting quarterback for them, Trey Waynes, who was a role player, Mackenzie Alexander, Andrew Sendejo, Jaron Kearse, and Marcus Sherrills. I've never heard of him, but he was a cornerback that the Minnesota Vikings did lose. So I didn't want to mention him because obviously he played for that secondary and was a veteran in that system. So they did lose 6 secondary players, and the guys they're bringing in, while they're young and have some really promising talent, they're also very inexperienced. They're also, they haven't played together. They don't know how the other people play. And the coaches don't really know, how to necessarily put them in the best position yet because they're still getting to know their guys. Now, granted, by week 17, they should have a pretty decent understanding. However, they're still going to be rookies. They're still going to be very young. They're still going to be their first year in the system. And, generally when you switch to a new system, when you transition to the NFL from college, you're going to have some rookie mistakes. You're going to struggle. And it takes a little bit more than it's going to take a little bit more than 15 games to really, grow with your team. It's to really bond, to really know what they're thinking, and for the coaches to understand their players, to put them in the best situation. However, the Detroit Lions wide receiver core has been together for a couple years now. At least the big play guys, the veterans, the big names on this offense have been together for a while, or they're going into their second, third year, and they've had a full season to bond with their teammates. They've had a full season to bond with the coaches, and the coaches have had a full season to put them in the best position. Guys like Kenny Galladay going into his 4th year. I believe Marvin Jones is going into his 4th year with the Detroit Lions. Amendola is going into his 2nd year. Marvin Hall is going into his 2nd year. Hawkins is going into his 2nd year as a Detroit Lion. We have Allison, who's a 1st year. Quintez Cephas, who is a 1st year wide receiver. You have Jesse James, who's been here for a year now. You have Hunter Bryant, who's a rookie. But you also have Isaac Nauta, who's going into a 2nd year. We have a little bit more experience on this receiving core, and I think we have a lot more, veteran talent than the Minnesota Vikings do in that secondary. Now, I know they still have Harrison Smith, and I know they still have Anthony Harris, who are good safeties, but if your safeties are your safeties are not going to be able to cover everybody. If your cornerbacks are getting beat, eventually the offense is going to take advantage. No matter how gifted your safeties are, if your cornerbacks are getting beat, then your team is going to have a rough day in the air. And I think the Detroit Lions are going to take huge advantage of that inexperience of those young guys. And I think that they're going to put up a ton of yards. I think Marvin Jones, I think Kenny Galladay both have 100 yards and at least a touchdown. I think Danny Amendola has a couple really big 3rd down conversions. I think TJ Hawkinson gets a touchdown and a couple big plays. I just think this is a day Matthew Stafford and the offense is going to air it out. They're going to throw for 300, 400, 400 yards, 4, 5, maybe even 6 touchdowns. They're just going to absolutely, the offense is just going to go crazy this day against an inexperienced secondary, a much weaker defense than what they played last year. And I think that they're going to have a field day. Second year under Darrell Bevell, everybody's more comfortable. Everybody's getting to know the system better. And by week 17, with playoffs, playoffs maybe being on the line, the division maybe being on the line, they're going to play as hard as they can. They're going to do everything in their power to win this football game and hopefully win the division. And I think that this is going to be, one of those games where Marvin Jones has a huge day against a division rival. Matthew Stafford is just on that day. Darrell Bevell's making great play calls. The running backs are draining the clock, having a good day. The wide receivers get huge plays. And I think the Detroit Lions, I think they really dominate this game. And I think that they, prove in week 17 to the rest of the league that we're making the playoffs. Watch out for the Detroit Lions, because if you're not prepared, we're going to beat you. No matter who you are, whether you're the 1 seed or the 7 seed, you got to watch out, because we are coming for you. And as I said, I think they win this game in, dominant fashion and finishing the season 10-6. Now, 10-6 is a very good record. I have the Detroit Lions, as I said, going 10-6 this season, 5-1 in the division, with our only 6 losses being to the New Orleans Saints, the Atlanta Falcons, the Tennessee Titans, the Minnesota Vikings, the Houston Texans, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So all very good teams, all very, very realistic playoff contenders for this 2020 season. Just because I'm predicting that they lose these games doesn't mean that they can't win these games. I can see a reality where they win any of these 6 games, and I can see a reality where they lose any of these 6 games. I can see a reality where they lose to the Jaguars, or I can see a reality where they, beat the Saints. The NFL is very tough to predict. Obviously that's what this is. It's a prediction. We've never seen these guys play together. This is all what I think they're going to do next year based on what I see on paper, what I've seen them do for other teams, and what, I expect out of our roster this year. And, I think 10-6 is a very realistic expectation. Is 10-6 good enough to win the division? Historically, 10-6 has won the NFC North before, but it was the last time it was done, it was Green Bay in 2016, narrowly beating out the Detroit Lions at 9-7. The Green Bay Packers went 10-6. They had a 1-game advantage on the Detroit Lions, winning the NFC North, making it to the playoffs, while the Detroit Lions made it to the playoffs as a wild card team. Just because the Detroit Lions might not win the division at 10-6 does not mean that 10-6 is not a good record, and it does not mean they will not make it to the playoffs. 10-6 with with 7 teams making the playoffs for each conference, 10-6 is definitely going to be good enough for any team. Any team that goes 10-6 is going to make the playoffs, whether it be a wild card or a divisional champion. The Detroit Lions are going to make the playoffs at 10-6. They're going to be competitive. Whether they host a playoff game or not, they're still going to make the playoffs. I still think they have a very good chance. I think they have a very solid roster. I think they can definitely win a playoff game this year. Now, whether they can, make a playoff run, and whether they can go to the Super Bowl and make that Cinderella story complete is yet to be seen. Obviously, we don't know who's going to make the playoffs. We don't know who the Lions are going to be playing. We don't know the seeding. We don't know the home field advantage, anything like that. So right now, it's impossible to say. But I think if the Detroit Lions, make it to the playoffs, if they're giving a shot, I think that with the running game being so good, I think the defense is going to have a huge, bounce back season. I think the Detroit Lions are going to be dangerous next season. I think if they make the playoffs, even if it's at the 7th seed, the number 2 seed or whoever is the best seed in wild card weekend that doesn't get a bye is going to have to prepare very heavily and they're going to have to prepare heavily for the Detroit Lions, because even if they make it the 7th seed, they're going to be dangerous. All they need is a chance in the playoffs, and they can, make some noise. So that is my prediction. That is what I think is going to happen. Now, getting on to team awards. Now, I have 7 awards that I want to give out to the Detroit Lions players, those being Team MVP, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year, Offensive Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year, Breakout Player of the Year, and Unexpected Contributor of the Year. Now, MVP, as it always is, it's going to be Matthew Stafford unless he gets injured or unless this running game absolutely breaks out and Carry-On or Swift gets 1,000+ yards, 10+ touchdowns. Unless something crazy happens, Matthew Stafford's going to win this award. He's the engine to the offense. He's been here for over, almost 2 decades at this point. He is the engine. He's the heart and soul of this Detroit Lions team. And, he's going to be successful next season. And why I think, he's going to win MVP, because that's just going to happen. He's the MVP. He's the best player on the team. If he goes down, obviously we saw last year, we can't win a game without him. And that makes him the most valuable player to the team. And I think he wins that for the Detroit Lions. I think he wins that Detroit Lions team award of MVP. and I also think he could win Comeback Player of the Year if he plays well enough. Now moving on to Offensive Player of the Year, I have the man himself, Kenny Galladay. Led the league in touchdowns last year at over 1,100 yards while only having, I believe, like 65 catches or something, averaging 18-something yards a catch. And he did all this while playing with backup quarterbacks for half the season. This guy's a monster. He's a top 10 wide receiver. He's going to, I think, even take a bigger step forward next year if Matthew Stafford is healthy the entire season. I think he is going to just have a phenomenal season. I think he's going to have a phenomenal rest of his career. And next year will be no exception. Kenny Galladay wins Offensive Player of the Year for the Detroit Lions. Moving on to Defensive Player of the Year, this is a guy that we brought in free agency from New England, and that guy is Jamie Collins. Now, I know we haven't seen Jamie Collins play very well outside the Patriots system, but we play a very similar system to the Patriots, and I think we're going to use him very similarly to what we see, what we saw Bill Belichick do with him last year. And if we get anything like we saw from Jamie Collins last year, he's going to be a monster for the Lions. He can rush the passer. He can cover. He got interceptions. He forced fumbles. He had a touchdown. I mean, he made plays for this team day in, day out, and he's going to be a veteran leader. He's going to be, he's probably going to be a captain next year, and, he's going to make plays in this linebacker core for the Detroit Lions. And he's also going to tutor some of these younger guys, which behind the scenes might not, look very good for, just because you mentor a guy doesn't mean that you're necessarily the Defensive Player of the Year, but I think that he's going to help us this year and, make plays, be the Defensive Player of the Year. And he's also going to help groom some of these young guys to take over when his contract expires, when he decides to hang up his cleats. And I think that he's going to set the linebackers up for a very bright future in Detroit. Now moving on to Offensive Rookie of the Year, I have DeAndre Swift almost, by default, because who else did we draft? Quintez Cephas in the 5th, Jason Huntley in the 5th, and that was really it. But I still think that DeAndre Swift is deserving of it. I think he's still going to get, if you looked at my predictions, I still think he gets almost 900 yards, 8 to 10 touchdowns. I think he is a driving force behind Detroit's success next year with him and carrying the rock, taking loads off each other, taking loads off Matthew Stafford, really balancing it all out. And I think that Swift is going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year in a landslide in Detroit, just because, there's not a lot of talent behind him as far as rookies on the offensive side of the ball, but also he's just such a fantastic talent at running back that he's going to deserve it. He's going to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, and he's going to be a fan favorite in Detroit. Now, moving on to Defensive Rookie of the Year, it's got to be Jeffrey Okudah. Now, with this one, I kind of struggle between Jeff or Julian, but I thought the 3rd overall pick is going to make a huge difference in our defense. He's going to have to replace Darius Slay. He's going to have to step up, and I think he's going to make plays. I think he's going to be a fantastic cornerback out of Ohio State, as most of them are. And he's going to play on day one. When I can't say necessarily I can't say for sure that Julian Okwara is going to play day one every single snap like Jeffrey Okudah is. So because of those reasons, I have to go with Jeffrey Okudah for the Defensive Rookie of the Year for the Detroit Lions in the 2020 season. Now getting into some of the tougher ones, Breakout Player of the Year, I have Kerryon Johnson. Now, as I said just a few minutes ago, I think Swift is going to have a huge year, but I think Kerryon could have an even better year. I think Kerryon is going to stay healthy because he has people taking some load off of his back, and then I think that he gets back to that 5 yards of carry that we saw as a rookie, and even if we give it to him, 10, 15 times a game, he's still going to have a fantastic season. Him and Swift are going to, carry this Lions offense on the ground, and we're going to have one of the most efficient rushing offenses in the Matthew Stafford era next year. And, Kerryon Johnson is going to break out, finally have that great season that we all expected from him last year. After a stellar rookie season last year, he kind of took a step back. However, obviously he had some things working against him, but I think he takes a huge step next year. I think he wins Breakout Player of the Year. Now, the last award I want to give out is Unexpected Contributor of the Year. Now, this one was tough because obviously if they're unexpected, how am I going to give the award out right now? So I kind of went through the roster and I looked at, guys that aren't getting a lot of praise that I'm personally very high on. I think they will do very well in the NFL or in the Detroit Lions system. I think they will contribute to the Detroit Lions team success in 2020 that, the media is not talking about, even certain Lions YouTubers aren't talking about. And I came to the conclusion that Jaron Kearse is going to be that unexpected contributor. Now, most likely he's not going to start. He's going to be probably our 3rd safety, but this guy is an absolute monster. I mean, he's like 6'4", 215. He can play in the box. He can play in the slot corner. He can play deep safety. He can play box safety. I mean, he can do it all. He's going to be a Swiss Army knife. And Matt Patricia got him for a reason. You don't get a guy like Jaron Kearse unless you got a plan for him. And, he was kind of the Isaiah Simmons before Isaiah Simmons. Obviously, Jaron Kearse is not quite that, isn't quite as hyped up. He's probably not quite as talented as Isaiah. However, he has the same skill set. He does a lot of the same things. And I think that he's going to be a Swiss Army knife in this defense. He's going to do a lot of different things. He's going to be rotating coverages. One snap he's going to be playing a deep free safety. One snap he's going to be playing a box safety to come up and thump you. And then, he could even rush the passer a little bit on blitzes or as an edge rusher, which he did at Minnesota a little bit. Now, those were my awards that I gave out. If you disagree with the record, if you disagree with any of the awards that I gave out, obviously leave those down in the comments below. I'd love to hear what you guys think about the record, the awards, anything like that, anything related to the Detroit Lions. With that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. If you are enjoying the content, as I said, and are new to the channel, consider liking the videos and subscribing to the channel. That helps push the channel out, bring it in. I would be very appreciative to somebody for taking 2 seconds out of their day to help me out. With that being said, thank you all so very much for watching this video. As I said, if you disagree with anything I said, put those disagreements down in the comments below and we could have a conversation about it. But if there is more Lions before tomorrow, I'll obviously make a video letting every single person know so. But until then, that is all I have for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see everybody in the video tomorrow. Bye, guys.